Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is a granodiorite stele discovered in 1799 which is inscribed with three versions of a decree issued at Memphis, Egypt in 196 BC during the Ptolemaic dynasty on behalf of King Ptolemy V Epiphanes. The top and middle texts are in ancient Egyptian using hieroglyphic and Demotic scripts, while the bottom is in ancient Greek. The decree has only minor differences among the three versions, so the Rosetta Stone became key to deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphs, thereby opening a window into ancient Egyptian history. The stone was carved during the Hellenistic period and is believed to have originally been displayed within a temple, possibly at nearby Say, Egypt. It was probably moved in late antiquity or during the Mamluk period, and was eventually used as building material in the construction of Fort Julian near the town of Rashid, Rosetta, in the Nile Delta. It was discovered there in July 1799 by French soldier Pierre-François Bouchard during the Napoleonic campaign in Egypt. It was the first ancient Egyptian bilingual text recovered in modern times, and it aroused widespread public interest with its potential to decipher this previously untranslated hieroglyphic script. Lithographic copies and plaster casts began circulating among European museums and scholars. The British defeated the French and took the stone to London under the capitulation of Alexandria in 1801. It has been on public display at the British Museum almost continuously since 1802 and is the most visited object there. Study of the decree was already underway when the first full translation of the Greek text appeared in 1803. Jean-François Champollion announced the transliteration of the Egyptian scripts in Paris in 1822. It took longer still before scholars were able to read ancient Egyptian inscriptions and literature confidently. Major advances in the decoding were recognition that the stone offered three versions of the same text, 1799, that the Demotic text used phonetic characters to spell foreign names, 1802, that the hieroglyphic text did so as well, and had pervasive similarities to the Demotic, 1814, and that phonetic characters were also used to spell native Egyptian words, 1822-1824. Three other fragmentary copies of the same decree were discovered later, and several similar Egyptian bilingual or trilingual inscriptions are now known, including three slightly earlier Ptolemaic decrees, the Decree of Alexandria in 243 BC, the Decree of Canopus in 238 BC, and the Memphis Decree of Ptolemy IV, circa 218 BC. The Rosetta Stone is no longer unique, but it was the essential key to modern understanding of ancient Egyptian literature and civilization. The term Rosetta Stone is now used to refer to the essential clue to a new field of knowledge. Description: the Rosetta Stone is listed as a stone of black granodiorite, bearing three inscriptions, found at Rosetta in a contemporary catalogue of the artifacts discovered by the French expedition and surrendered to British troops in 1801. At some period after its arrival in London, the inscriptions were colored in white chalk to make them more legible, and the remaining surface was covered with a layer of carnauba wax designed to protect it from visitors' fingers. This gave a dark color to the stone that led to its mistaken identification as black basalt. These additions were removed when the stone was cleaned in 1999, revealing the original dark gray tint of the rock, the sparkle of its crystalline structure, and a pink vein running across the top left corner. Comparisons with the claimed collection of Egyptian rock samples showed a close resemblance to rock from a small granodiorite quarry at Gebeltinger on the west bank of the Nile, west of Elephantine in the region of Aswan. The pink vein is typical of granodiorite from this region. The Rosetta Stone is 1,123 mm, 3 feet 8 in, high at its highest point, 757 mm, 2 feet 5.8 in, wide, and 284 mm, 11 in, thick. It weighs approximately 760 kilograms, 1,680 pounds. It bears three inscriptions, the top register in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, the second in the Egyptian Demotic script, and the third in ancient Greek. The front surface is polished and the inscriptions lightly incised on it. The sides of the stone are smoothed, but the back is only roughly worked, presumably because this would have not been visible when it was erected. Original stele. The Rosetta Stone is a fragment of a larger stele. No additional fragments were found in later searches of the Rosetta site. Owing to its damaged state, none of the three texts is absolutely complete. The top register, composed of Egyptian hieroglyphs, suffered the most damage. Only the last 14 lines of the hieroglyphic text can be seen, all of them are broken on the right side, and 12 of them on the left. Below it, the middle register of Demotic text has survived best. It has 32 lines, of which the first 14 are slightly damaged on the right side. The bottom register of Greek text contains 54 lines, of which the first 27 survive in full, the rest are increasingly fragmentary due to a diagonal break at the bottom right of the stone. Memphis Decree and its context. The stele was erected after the coronation of King Ptolemy V and was inscribed with a decree that established the divine cult of the new ruler. The decree was issued by a congress of priests who gathered at Memphis. The date is given as 4 Xanthicos in the Macedonian calendar and 18 Mechir in the Egyptian calendar, which corresponds to 27th of March 196 BC. The year is stated as the 9th year of Ptolemy V's reign, equated with 197-196 BC, which is confirmed by naming 4 priests who officiated in that year. Eidos, son of Eidos, was priest of the divine cults of Alexander the Great and the 5 Ptolemies down to Ptolemy V himself. The other 3 priests named in turn in the inscription are those who led the worship of Berenice wife of Ptolemy III, Arsinoe wife and sister of Ptolemy II, and Arsinoe mother of Ptolemy V. However, a second date is also given in the Greek and hieroglyphic texts, corresponding to 27th of November 197 BC, the official anniversary of Ptolemy's coronation. The Demotic text conflicts with this, listing consecutive days in March for the decree and the anniversary. It is uncertain why this discrepancy exists, but it is clear that the decree was issued in 196 BC and that it was designed to re-establish the rule of the Ptolemaic kings over Egypt. The decree was issued during a turbulent period in Egyptian history. Ptolemy V Epiphanes reigned from 204 to 181 BC, the son of Ptolemy IV Philopator and his wife and sister Arsinoe. He had become ruler at the age of 5 after the sudden death of both of his parents, who were murdered in a conspiracy that involved Ptolemy IV's mistress Agathocles, according to contemporary sources. The conspirators effectively ruled Egypt as Ptolemy V's guardians until a revolt broke out 2 years later under General Tlepolemus, when Agathocles and her family were lynched by a mob in Alexandria. Tlepolemus, in turn, was replaced as guardian in 201 BC by Rostamnes of Lyza, who was chief minister at the time of the Memphis Decree. Political forces beyond the borders of Egypt exacerbated the internal problems of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Antiochus III the Great and Philip V of Macedon had made a pact to divide Egypt's overseas possessions. Philip had seized several islands and cities in Caria and Thrace, while the Battle of Panium, 198 BC, had resulted in the transfer of Coel Syria, including Judea, from the Ptolemies to the Seleucids. Meanwhile, in the south of Egypt, there was a long-standing revolt that had begun during the reign of Ptolemy IV, led by Horwefer and by his successor Anquifer. Both the war and the internal revolt were still ongoing when the young Ptolemy V was officially crowned at Memphis at the age of 12, 7 years after the start of his reign, and when, just over a year later, the Memphis Decree was issued. Stelae of this kind, which were established on the initiative of the temples rather than that of the king, are unique to Ptolemaic Egypt. In the preceding pharaonic period it would have been unheard of for anyone but the divine rulers themselves to make national decisions. By contrast, this way of honoring a king was a feature of Greek cities. Rather than making his eulogy himself, the king had himself glorified and deified by his subjects or representative groups of his subjects. The decree records that Ptolemy V gave a gift of silver and grain to the temples. It also records that there was particularly high flooding of the Nile in the 8th year of his reign, and he had the excess waters dammed for the benefit of the farmers. In return, the priesthood pledged that the king's birthday and coronation days would be celebrated annually and that all the priests of Egypt would serve him alongside the other gods. The decree concludes with the instruction that a copy was to be placed in every temple, inscribed in the language of the gods, Egyptian hieroglyphs, the language of documents, Demotic, and the language of the Greeks as used by the Ptolemaic government. Securing the favor of the priesthood was essential for the Ptolemaic kings to retain effective rule over the populace. The high priests of Memphis where the king was crowned were particularly important, as they were the highest religious authorities of the time and had influence throughout the kingdom. Given that the decree was issued at Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt, rather than Alexandria, the center of government of the ruling Ptolemies, it is evident that the young king was anxious to gain their active support. Thus, although the government of Egypt had been Greek-speaking ever since the conquests of Alexander the Great, the Memphis decree, like the three similar earlier decrees, included texts in Egyptian to show its connection to the general populace by way of the literate Egyptian priesthood. There can be no one definitive English translation of the decree, not only because modern understanding of the ancient languages continues to develop, but also because of the minor differences between the three original texts. Older translations by E. A. Wallace Budge, 1904, 1913, and Edwin R. Bevan, 1927, are easily available but are now outdated, as can be seen by comparing them with the recent translation by R. S. Simpson, which is based on the Demotic text and can be found online, or, best of all, with the modern translations of all three texts, with introduction and facsimile drawing, that were published by Quirk and Andrews in 1989. The stele was almost certainly not originally placed at Rashid, Rosetta, where it was found, but more likely came from a temple site farther inland, possibly the royal town of Say. The temple from which it originally came was probably closed around AD 392 when Roman Emperor Theodosius I ordered the closing of all non-Christian temples of worship. The original stele broke at some point, its largest piece becoming what we now know as the Rosetta Stone. Ancient Egyptian temples were later used as quarries for new construction, and the Rosetta Stone probably was reused in this manner. Later it was incorporated in the foundations of a fortress constructed by the Mameluke Sultan Qaib, circa 1416–1814–96, to defend the Boulbydine branch of the Nile at Rashid. There it lay for at least another 3 centuries until its rediscovery. 3 other inscriptions relevant to the same Memphis decree have been found since the discovery of the Rosetta Stone: the Nubera stele, a stele found in Elephantine and Taha, and an inscription found at the Temple of Philae, on the Philae obelisk. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, the hieroglyphic texts of these inscriptions were relatively intact. The Rosetta Stone had been deciphered long before they were found, but later Egyptologists have used them to refine the reconstruction of the hieroglyphs that must have been used in the lost portions of the hieroglyphic text on the Rosetta Stone. Rediscovery. Napoleon's 1798 campaign in Egypt inspired a burst of Egyptomania in Europe, and especially France. A corps of 167 technical experts, savants, known as the Commission des Sciences et des Arts, accompanied the French expeditionary army to Egypt. On July 15, 1799, French soldiers under the command of Colonel Hotba were strengthening the defenses of Fort Julian, a couple of miles northeast of the Egyptian port city of Rosetta, modern-day Rashid. Lieutenant Pierre-François Bouchard spotted a slab with inscriptions on one side that the soldiers had uncovered. He and Hotba saw at once that it might be important and informed General Jacques-François Menou, who happened to be at Rosetta. The find was announced to Napoleon's newly founded scientific association in Cairo, the Institut d'Egypte, in a report by Commission member Michel-Ange Lancret noting that it contained 3 inscriptions, the first in hieroglyphs and the third in Greek, and rightly suggesting that the 3 inscriptions were versions of the same text. Lancret's report, dated July 19, 1799, was read to a meeting of the Institute soon after 25th of July. Bouchard, meanwhile, transported the stone to Cairo for examination by scholars. Napoleon himself inspected what had already begun to be called La Pierre de Rosette, the Rosetta Stone, shortly before his return to France in August 1799. The discovery was reported in September in Courrier d'Egypte, the official newspaper of the French expedition. The anonymous reporter expressed a hope that the stone might one day be the key to deciphering hieroglyphs. In 1803 of the Commission's technical experts devised ways to make copies of the texts on the stone. One of these experts was Jean-Joseph Marcel, a printer and gifted linguist, who is credited as the first to recognize that the middle text was written in the Egyptian Demotic script, rarely used for stone inscriptions and seldom seen by scholars at that time, rather than Syriac as had originally been thought. It was artist and inventor Nicolas Jacques Conte who found a way to use the stone itself as a printing block to reproduce the inscription. A slightly different method was adopted by Antoine Galland. The prints that resulted were taken to Paris by General Charles Juguin. Scholars in Europe were now able to see the inscriptions and attempt to read them. After Napoleon's departure, French troops held off British and Ottoman attacks for another 18 months. In March 1801, the British landed at Aboukir Bay. Menou was now in command of the French expedition. His troops, including the Commission, marched north towards the Mediterranean coast to meet the enemy, transporting the stone along with many other antiquities. He was defeated in battle, and the remnant of his army retreated to Alexandria where they were surrounded and besieged, the stone now inside the city. Menou surrendered on August 30th. From French to British possession. After the surrender, a dispute arose over the fate of the French archaeological and scientific discoveries in Egypt, including the artifacts, biological specimens, notes, plans, and drawings collected by the members of the Commission. Menou refused to hand them over, claiming that they belonged to the Institute. British General John Hely Hutchinson refused to end the siege until Menou gave in. Scholars Edward Daniel Clarke and William Richard Hamilton, newly arrived from England, agreed to examine the collections in Alexandria and claimed to have found many artifacts that the French had not revealed. In a letter home, Clarke said that we found much more in their possession than was represented or imagined. Hutchinson claimed that all materials were property of the British Crown, but French scholar Etienne Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire told Clarke and Hamilton that the French would rather burn all their discoveries than turn them over, referring ominously to the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. Clarke and Hamilton pleaded the French scholar's case to Hutchinson, who finally agreed that items such as natural history specimens would be considered the scholar's private property. Menou quickly claimed the stone, too, as his private property. Hutchinson was equally aware of the stone's unique value and rejected Menou's claim. Eventually an agreement was reached, and the transfer of the objects was incorporated into the capitulation of Alexandria signed by representatives of the British, French, and Ottoman forces. It is not clear exactly how the stone was transferred into British hands, as contemporary accounts differ. Colonel Tompkins Hillgrove Turner, who was to escort it to England, claimed later that he had personally seized it from Menou and carried it away on a gun carriage. In a much more detailed account, Edward Daniel Clarke stated that a French officer and member of the Institute had taken him, his student John Grips, and Hamilton secretly into the back streets behind Menou's residence and revealed the stone hidden under protective carpets among Menou's baggage. According to Clarke, their informant feared that the stone might be stolen if French soldiers saw it. Hutchinson was informed at once and the stone was taken away possibly by Turner and his gun carriage. Turner brought the stone to England aboard the captured French frigate HMS Egyptian, landing in Portsmouth in February 1802. His orders were to present it and the other antiquities to King George III. The king, represented by War Secretary Lord Hobart, directed that it should be placed in the British Museum. According to Turner's narrative, he and Hobart agreed that the stone should be presented to scholars at the Society of Antiquaries of London, of which Turner was a member, before its final deposit in the museum. It was first seen and discussed there at a meeting on March 11, 1802. In 1802, the Society created 4 plaster casts of the inscriptions, which were given to the universities of Oxford, Cambridge and Edinburgh and to Trinity College Dublin. Soon afterwards, prints of the inscriptions were made and circulated to European scholars. Before the end of 1802, the stone was transferred to the British Museum, where it is located today. New inscriptions painted in white on the left and right edges of the slab stated that it was captured in Egypt by the British Army in 1801 and presented by King George III. The stone has been exhibited almost continuously in the British Museum since June 1802. During the middle of the 19th century, it was given the inventory number EA24, EA standing for Egyptian Antiquities. It was part of a collection of ancient Egyptian monuments captured from the French expedition, including a sarcophagus of Nectanebo II, EA-10, the statue of a high priest of Ammon, EA-81, and a large granite fist, EA-9. The objects were soon discovered to be too heavy for the floors of Montague House, the original building of the British Museum, and they were transferred to a new extension that was added to the mansion. The Rosetta Stone was transferred to the Sculpture Gallery in 1834 shortly after Montague House was demolished and replaced by the building that now houses the British Museum. According to the museum's records, the Rosetta Stone is its most visited single object. A simple image of it was the museum's best-selling postcard for several decades, and a wide variety of merchandise bearing the text from the Rosetta Stone, or replicating its distinctive shape, is sold in the museum shops. The Rosetta Stone was originally displayed at a slight angle from the horizontal, and rested within a metal cradle that was made for it, which involved shaving off very small portions of its sides to ensure that the cradle fitted securely. It originally had no protective covering, and it was found necessary by 1847 to place it in a protective frame, despite the presence of attendants to ensure that it was not touched by visitors. Since 2004, the conserved stone has been on display in a specially built case in the center of the Egyptian Sculpture Gallery. A replica of the Rosetta Stone is now available in the King's Library of the British Museum, without a case and free to touch, as it would have appeared to early 19th century visitors. The museum was concerned about heavy bombing in London towards the end of the First World War in 1917, and the Rosetta Stone was moved to safety, along with other portable objects of value. The stone spent the next 2 years 15 meters, 50 feet, below ground level in a station of the Postal Tube Railway at Mount Pleasant near Holborn. Other than during wartime, the Rosetta Stone has left the British Museum only once, for 1 month in October 1972. To be displayed alongside Champollions' letter at the Louvre in Paris on the 150th anniversary of the letter's publication. Even when the Rosetta Stone was undergoing conservation measures in 1999, the work was done in the gallery so that it could remain visible to the public. Reading the Rosetta Stone. Prior to the discovery of the Rosetta Stone and its eventual decipherment, the ancient Egyptian language and script had not been understood since shortly before the fall of the Roman Empire. The usage of the hieroglyphic script had become increasingly specialized even in the later pharaonic period. By the 4th century AD, few Egyptians were capable of reading them. Monumental use of hieroglyphs ceased after the closing of all non-Christian temples in 391 by Roman Emperor Theodosius I. The last known inscription is dated to 24th of August 394, found at Philae and known as the Graffito of Esmatacum. Hieroglyphs retain their pictorial appearance, and classical authors emphasize this aspect, in sharp contrast to the Greek and Roman alphabets. In the 5th century, the priest Horapollo wrote Hieroglyphica, an explanation of almost 200 glyphs. His work was believed to be authoritative, yet it was misleading in many ways, and this and other works were a lasting impediment to the understanding of Egyptian writing. Later attempts at decipherment were made by Arab historians in medieval Egypt during the 9th and 10th centuries. Halnan al-Misri and Ibn Masha'iyya were the first historians to study hieroglyphs, by comparing them to the contemporary Coptic language used by Coptic priests in their time. The study of hieroglyphs continued with fruitless attempts at decipherment by European scholars, notably Johannes Goropius Becanus in the 16th century, Athanasius Kircher in the 17th, and Georg Zoga in the 18th. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 provided critical missing information, gradually revealed by a succession of scholars, that eventually allowed Jean-François Champollion to solve the puzzle that Kircher had called the riddle of the Sphinx. Greek text. The Greek text on the Rosetta Stone provided the starting point. Ancient Greek was widely known to scholars, but they were not familiar with details of its use in the Hellenistic period as a government language in Ptolemaic Egypt. Large-scale discoveries of Greek papyri were a long way in the future. Thus, the earliest translations of the Greek text of the stone show the translators still struggling with the historical context and with administrative and religious jargon. Stephen Weston verbally presented an English translation of the Greek text at a Society of Antiquaries meeting in April 1802. Meanwhile, two of the lithographic copies made in Egypt had reached the Institut de France in Paris in 1801. There, librarian and antiquarian Gabriel de la Porte Dutheil set to work on a translation of the Greek, but he was dispatched elsewhere on Napoleon's orders almost immediately, and he left his unfinished work in the hands of colleague Hubert Pascal Amelin. Amelin produced the first published translations of the Greek text in 1803, in both Latin and French to ensure that they would circulate widely. At Cambridge, Richard Porson worked on the missing lower right corner of the Greek text. He produced a skillful suggested reconstruction, which was soon being circulated by the Society of Antiquaries alongside its prints of the inscription. At almost the same moment, Christian Gottlob Heyne in Göttingen was making a new Latin translation of the Greek text that was more reliable than Amelin's and was first published in 1803. It was reprinted by the Society of Antiquaries in a special issue of its journal Archaeologia in 1811, alongside Weston's previously unpublished English translation, Colonel Turner's narrative, and other documents. Demotic text. At the time of the stone's discovery, Swedish diplomat and scholar Johann David Akerblad was working on a little-known script of which some examples had recently been found in Egypt, which came to be known as Demotic. He called it cursive Coptic because he was convinced that it was used to record some form of the Coptic language, the direct descendant of ancient Egyptian, although it had few similarities with the later Coptic script. French Orientalist Antoine Isaac Silvestre de Sacy had been discussing this work with Akerblad when he received one of the early lithographic prints of the Rosetta Stone in 1801 from Jean-Antoine Chaptal, French Minister of the Interior. He realized that the middle text was in this same script. He and Akerblad set to work, both focusing on the middle text and assuming that the script was alphabetical. They attempted to identify the points where Greek names ought to occur within this unknown text, by comparing it with the Greek. In 1802, Silvestre de Sacy reported to Chaptal that he had successfully identified 5 names: Alexandros, Alexandra, Ptolemaios, Arsino, and Ptolemy's title Epiphanes, while Akerblad published an alphabet of 29 letters, more than half of which were correct, that he had identified from the Greek names in the Demotic text. They could not, however, identify the remaining characters in the Demotic text, which, as is now known, included ideographic and other symbols alongside the phonetic ones. Egypt-United Kingdom relations. Mesh Hostili. Transliteration of Ancient Egyptian. References. Timeline of early publications about the Rosetta Stone. Notes. Bibliography. Adkins, Leslie, Adkins, R. A. 2000. The Keys of Egypt, The Obsession to Decipher Egyptian Hieroglyphs. HarperCollins. ISBN 978-00601943990. Allen, Don Cameron, 1960. The Predecessors of Jean-Paul Yuan. Proceedings of the American Philosophical Society. 144, 527-547. Andrews, Carol, 1985. The Rosetta Stone. British Museum Press. ISBN 978-087-226-0344. Usman, Jan, Jenkins, Andrew, 2003. The Mine of Egypt, History and Meaning in the Time of the Pharaohs. Harvard University Press. ISBN 978-0674-012110. Retrieved July 21, 2010. Antiquities Wishlist. Al-Akram Weekly. July 20, 2005. Archived from the original on September 16, 2010. Retrieved July 18, 2010. Bagnall, R. S., Darrow, P. 2004. The Hellenistic Period, Historical Sources and Translation. Blackwell. ISBN 14051-01334. Retrieved July 18, 2010. Bailey, Martin, January 21, 2003. Shifting the Blame. Forbes.com. Retrieved July 6, 2010. Bevan, E. R. 1927. The House of Ptolemy. Methuen. Retrieved July 18, 2010. Beer, M. L. 1999. The acquisition by the British Museum of Antiquities discovered during the French invasion of Egypt. In Davis, W. V. ed. Studies in Egyptian Antiquities. British Museum Publications. Brown, V. M. Harrell, J. A. 1998. Aswan Granite in Granodiorite. Göttinger Miss Zillan. 164, 133 137. Budge, E. A. Wallace, 1894. The Mummy, Chapters on Egyptian Funereal Archaeology. Cambridge University Press. Retrieved July 19, 2010. Budge, E. A. Wallace, 1904. The Decrees of Memphis and Canopus. Kegan Paul. Retrieved December 10, 2018. Budge, E. A. Wallace, 1913. The Rosetta Stone. British Museum. Retrieved June 12, 2010. Burrowa, Nina, 2007. Mirage, Napoleon's Scientists and the Unveiling of Egypt. HarperCollins. ISBN 978-0060597672. Grace, G. W. Van der Vecken, G. 1983. The Eponymous Priests of Ptolemaic Egypt, P. L. Batt. 24. Chronological lists of the priests of Alexandria and Ptolemais with a study of the demotic transcriptions of their names. Assistance by S. P. Vleeming. Leiden, Brill. ISBN 9040687991. Grace, G. W. 1999. Ptolemies at Temples. In Valbel, Dominique, ed. Le Décret de Memphis, Colloque de la Fondation Singer Polignac à l'occasion de la célébration du bicentenaire de la découverte de la pierre de Rosette. Paris. Clayton, Peter A. 2006. Chronicles of the Pharaohs, the reign-by-reign record of the rulers and dynasties of ancient Egypt. Thames and Hudson. ISBN 05286280. Cooper, Keith, April 14, 2010. New Rosetta Stone for GRBs as supernovae. Astronomy Now Online. Retrieved July 4, 2010. Duwachter, M. 1990. Champollion, Inscribe pour l'Egypte, in French. Gallimard. ISBN 978-2070531035. Downs, Jonathan, 2008. Discovery at Rosetta, the ancient stone that unlocked the mysteries of ancient Egypt. Skyhorse Publishing. ISBN 978-160239-271-7. Edwards, Charlotte, Milner, Catherine, July 20, 2003. Egypt demands return of the Rosetta Stone. The Daily Telegraph. Retrieved October 5, 2006. El Aref, Novine, November 30, 2005. The Rose of the Nile. Al-Akram Weekly. El Daily, Okasha, 2005. Egyptology, The Missing Millennium, Ancient Egypt in Medieval Arabic Writings. UCL Press. ISBN 184472-0632. Gillespie, C. C. Duwachter, M. 1987. Monuments of Egypt, the Napoleonic Edition. Princeton University Press. pp. 138. Horwefer. Egyptian Royal Genealogy. Retrieved June 12, 2010. Huttinger, Henry, July 28, 2005. Stolen Treasures, Zahi wants the Rosetta Stone back among other things. Cairo Magazine. Archived from the original on December 1, 2005. Retrieved October 6, 2006. International team accelerates investigation of immune-related genes. The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. September 6, 2000. Archived from the original on August 9, 2007. Retrieved November 23, 2006. Kitchen, Kenneth A. 1970. 2 donations still in the Brooklyn Museum. Journal of the American Research Center in Egypt. 8. DOI 10.2307 40,039. Meyerson, Daniel, 2004. The Linguist and the Emperor, Napoleon and Champollions Quest to Decipher the Rosetta Stone. Ballantine Books. ISBN 978-0345 45067 8. Middleton, A., Clem, D., 2003. The Geology of the Rosetta Stone. Journal of Egyptian Archaeology. 89, 207-216. Miller, E., et al. 2000. The Examination and Conservation of the Rosetta Stone at the British Museum. Inroy, A., Smith, P., eds. Tradition and Innovation. British Museum Publications. pp. 128-132. Nespoulas Falepu, Alexandra, 2015. Ptolemy Epiphane, Ristonicos et les Preachers d'Egypte. Le Décret de Memphis, 182 AC, edition Comité des Styles Care RT2/3/25/7 at G 44901, Senum 12. Montpellier, Université Paul Valéry. Nicholson, P. T. Shaw, I. 2000. Ancient Egyptian Materials and Technology. Cambridge University Press. Nishimura, Rick A., Tajik, A. Jamal, April 23, 1998. Evaluation of diastolic filling of left ventricle in health and disease. Doppler echocardiography is the clinician's Rosetta Stone. Journal of the American College of Cardiology. 30, 1, 818. DOI 10.1016/S0735109797001447. Mid 9207615. Retrieved July 5, 2010. Oxford English Dictionary. 2nd ed. Oxford University Press. 1989. ISBN 978-019-861-186 8. Parkinson, Richard B., Diffie, W., Simpson, R., S., 1999. Cracking Codes, The Rosetta Stone and Decipherment. University of California Press. ISBN 978-0520-202306. Retrieved June 12, 2010. Parkinson, Richard B. 2005. The Rosetta Stone. British Museum Objects in Focus. British Museum Press. ISBN 978-071141 5021 5. Quirk, Stephen, Andrews, Carol, 1989. The Rosetta Stone. Abrams. ISBN 978-081109 1572 5. Ray, J. D. 2007. The Rosetta Stone and the Rebirth of Ancient Egypt. Harvard University Press. ISBN 978-0674-024939. Robinson, Andrew, 2009. Lost Languages, The Enigma of the World's Undeciphered Scripts. Thames and Hudson. ISBN 978-0551 5. The Rosetta Stone. The British Museum. Retrieved June 12, 2010. Rosetta Stone row would be solved by loan to Egypt. BBC News. December 8, 2009. Retrieved July 14, 2010. Shaw, Ian, 2000. The Oxford History of Ancient Egypt. Oxford University Press. ISBN 019-280,458 8. Simpson, Gordon G., Dean, Carolyn, April 12, 2002. Arabidopsis, the Rosetta Stone of Flowering Time? Science. 296, 5566, 285-289. DOI 10.1126/science.296.5566.285. Retrieved November 23, 2006. Shaw, Ian, Nicholson, Paul, 1995. The Dictionary of Ancient Egypt. Harry N. Abrams. ISBN 081099096-2. Simpson, R. S. 1996. Demotic Grammar in the Ptolemaic Sacerdotal Decrees. Griffith Institute. ISBN 978-0900416-65-1. Simpson, R. S. and D. The Rosetta Stone, Translation of the Demotic Text. The British Museum. Archived from the original on July 6, 2010. Retrieved July 21, 2010.